Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the campfire. This is where we tell stories and enjoy each other's company. This is Clay Steele. Tonight, I want to tell you some more of the story about Hank Dillon, the Bigfoot hunter. He's got some stuff going on. This is part 6, The Watcher in the Woods. So if y'all find a place to sit down and get yourself something to drink, get settled in, watch the fire, and I'll tell you this part of the story. Hank held the phone tight as Tom's voice came through with just a hint of static. "Well, tell me everything," Hank said. Tom exhaled heavily on the other end. Well, I met with Comey. He didn't deny it. Any of it. Black helicopters, the sightings, the federal involvement in these disappearances. He said it's bigger than just surveillance or national security. There are factions that are inside the intelligence community that are actively suppressing the truth, and others who want to study whatever these beings actually are. "Oh, what did he say about the Sasquatch?" Hank asked him, lowering his voice as he stepped into the quiet of the back porch. "That it may not even be native to our planet." Tom paused, letting the words settle like dust in the silence. "Some people believe these things came here a long time ago, centuries back, maybe more. Crash landed, maybe. Survivors from some other planet. Others think they're a biological experiment gone bad. Others think they're just leftover remnants of Neanderthal times." "Well, that's a pretty wide range of possibilities," Hank muttered. "It sounds to me that they don't really know any more than we do." "Yeah, I know," Tom replied, "but listen to this. After I left Comey, I went to meet with Darnell Rhodes. Now, he was the one who originally pointed me towards some of these classified files years ago. Old DARPA programs. Deep black projects that no one really wanted to talk about. Only, when I got to his apartment, someone had already been there. His place was torn apart, drawers pulled out, files scattered, computer was gone. Whoever did it knew what they were looking for." Hank's jaw clenched. "Was he there?" "No," Tom said, "and no sign of where he went, just gone. I checked with his neighbors. No one's seen him in 2 days." "Do you suspect foul play? You think they took him?" "I think he knew too much," Tom said darkly. "Something about a program with the name of Project Silva?" Hank straightened out. "What the hell is Project Silva?" "It was a joint program between DARPA and the National Reconnaissance Office. It had to do with tracking non-human biological entities. Their term, not mine. In forested regions of North America. The word Silva means in the woods in Latin, so, that's how it got its name. The project supposedly ended in the 90s, but I kind of think it just went deeper underground." There was a long pause. "You still there?" Tom asked. "Yeah," Hank replied, rubbing his temple. "I'm here, just letting it settle in." "Listen," Tom continued. "This goes beyond sightings or old legends now. There's a pattern here. These creatures, wherever they are, they follow specific migratory routes. They kind of seem to avoid detection on purpose. Something's changed. They're getting closer to people. The activity's ramping up, and I think the government has something to do with it." "So what do we do now?" Hank asked him. Tom's voice dropped to a low whisper. "We find Darnell. And we find out what the hell Project Silva really uncovered. Now, that is before someone else makes us disappear too." Hank ended the call with Tom and stood motionless on the porch for quite a while. The morning sun casting long shadows across the wooden floorboards. A pair of finches fluttered noisily in the trees above. He stepped back inside the house, grabbed a mug of coffee from the kitchen and stared at it for a moment before pulling out his phone again. If anyone could help him navigate this web of secrecy, it was Wade. The phone rang twice before Wade picked up. "Hank, everything okay?" "Yeah, well, maybe. Depends on how weird your day's been so far." There was a pause. "Should I sit down?" Hank chuckled dryly. "Might not be a bad idea." He didn't leave anything out. Not this time. He talked for nearly 20 minutes, pacing the living room while Michelle sat on the sofa watching him nervously. When he finally mentioned Project Silva, he stopped walking and he let the silence just hang there. Wade let out a low whistle. "That's a hell of a story, Hank." "Yeah, I know how it sounds, but I trust Tom. I just need to know. Have you ever heard of anything called Project Silva? Anything in legal circles? Freedom of Information Act releases or military filings? Buried somewhere in redacted docs?" Wade hesitated. "Silva. It rings a bell, and not because I've seen it on the public-facing documents, but because of a client I represented just a few years ago. A whistleblower. He was retired from the intelligence community. He said he wanted to go on record with something related to an ecological surveillance program. The Pacific Northwest. Used the word Silva like it was common knowledge in his world. But when I asked about it, well, he clammed right up." "You think he knew something?" Hank asked. "Oh, definitely, yeah. I remember thinking at the time it sounded like one of those programs that gets erased from every system but still exists under some obscure budget code. Kind of like a ghost file." Hank nodded slowly. "You still have his info?" With that, Wade sighed. "Well, probably buried in an old archive box somewhere. I'll have to take a look. If he's still alive, maybe he can tell us more." "Do it. And Wade?" "Yeah?" "Be careful who you talk to. This goes deep." Wade's voice grew serious. "Well, you don't have to tell me that, Hank. I should be the one telling you to be careful. Now I'll start digging. Call me back in a day or two." Hank hung up the phone and stood there, the coffee now cold in his hand. He glanced over at Michelle and just shrugged his shoulders. Man, this was getting deeper by the minute. Wade Dillon leaned back in his desk chair at his downtown law office, the skyline of Denver gleaming beyond the high-rises windows. Files were piled in neat rows around him, his daily caseload forgotten for now. His brother's voice still echoed in his head. Project Silva. It was the kind of phrase that lit up alarm bells in legal and intelligence circles, the kind of thing that never showed up on Google, but showed up in whispered conversations and off-the-record files. He opened an encrypted archive folder on his secure drive and started scrolling through case files from 4 years ago. Clients flagged for unusual employment or government clearance. Halfway through, he found it. Vincent P. Talley, retired NSA contractor. Wade remembered him now. He was a jumpy, paranoid, eyes like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Talley had hinted at a project that monitored unexplainable migratory patterns in the northern wilderness, specifically Montana, Idaho, sections of Oregon and Washington. He'd mentioned code names: Silva, Borealis, Echo Root, said something about cross-species intelligence behavior, before he'd abruptly ended the consultation and walked on out. Wade had tried to follow up, but never heard from him again. Wade picked up his phone and dialed a contact he hadn't spoken to in years. A former federal investigator turned private analyst with the name of Carter. If anyone could pull a string in that black budget realm, it was Carter. And when he picked up the phone, Wade didn't waste any time. "I need everything you can find on a classified program, codename Silva. I think it ties into biological surveillance and maybe something happening out in the Rockies." There was a long pause. Then Carter's voice came low and cautious. "Wade, why are you asking about that?" Because my brother's involved and I need to know what the hell's he's walked into. The laptop fan whirred softly on the kitchen table as Hank leaned over the keyboard. Michelle beside him, sipping from a chipped mug of strong coffee. The early afternoon sun streamed through the window, warming the room, but neither one of them felt particularly relaxed. Michelle pointed to the screen. There, that's the second article in a row mentioned electromagnetic interference, in the very same area where they reported Sasquatch sightings. Coincidence? Not anymore, Hank said. I've been logging EM spikes like this for months. Never had a connection, until now. The laptop was open to a GIS map, red pins scattered across northern Colorado, southern Wyoming. Well, each red pin marked a reported sighting, an EM surge, or a vanished hiker. Patterns were emerging. It still didn't make any sense. Michelle flipped open Hank's leather-bound field notebook. Now, you mentioned a power station near the Rawa Wilderness that had unexplained outages? Yeah, Hank said, rubbing his jaw. I thought it was weather-related, but it lines up with a sighting that Earl mentioned. Something big moving through the trees, tall and silent. She looked up at him. You think these creatures, Sasquatch or whatever they are sensitive to electromagnetic fields? Or generating them, Hank muttered. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. Got a lead. Roads may be alive. Going off grid for 48 hours. Hank read it aloud. Michelle's eyes got wide. Boy, you were right. This is getting deeper by the minute, she said. Yep, Hank replied, his voice low. And we haven't even scratched the surface. Well, rain pattered lightly against the window pane of the office at the Pentagon. Inside, the lights were dim except for the green glow of a desk lamp that illuminated a stack of secure documents and an old-fashioned rotary phone, buzzing softly with an incoming encrypted call. A hand, calm and deliberate, reached out and picked it up. Yeah, came a low, filtered voice. It's me, James Comey said quietly on the other end. We've got a problem. There was a pause. Tom Sheffield. He met with me yesterday. Asked about Project Silva. The voice on the other end stayed measured. What did you tell him? Just enough to satisfy his curiosity, or so I hoped, Comey said. But he left here and went to Darnell Rhodes' apartment. Saw that someone had been there before him. Do you think he's connected the dots? Some of them, Comey admitted. He's getting too close. If he finds Rhodes, it's over. There was a long pause when the voice returned, cold and sharp. We can't let him take the next step. Project Silva can't be exposed. I know, Comey said quietly. Then handle it. The line went dead. Comey sat still in the quiet hum of the room. The storm outside gently pressing against the walls like a held breath. He slowly replaced the receiver. Lightning flickered through the blinds, casting jagged shadows across the desk, as if to underline the urgency of what was coming next. He dialed the number he knew only too well, the man who handled matters like this. The flickering neon sign outside that rundown motel buzzed like a dying insect, casting a pulsing red glow into the cracked blinds of room 9. Inside, Tom Sheffield hunched over a small table beneath a crooked wall lamp, scribbling furiously into a weathered notebook he had found in Darnell Rhodes' desk. Pages were filled with names, coordinates, redacted documents, half-legible scribbles, and hastily drawn maps. He muttered under his breath, retracing connections between Project Silva, the black helicopters, and Darnell's disappearance. The motel room smelled faintly of mildew and old cigarettes. But Tom barely noticed. His thoughts were racing. He was caught in a tangle of classified data and conspiracy. He reached for his burner phone and checked for signals. Still nothing. He couldn't risk logging into a traceable network. Not now. A gust of wind rattled the old window pane, drawing his eyes toward the shadow beyond the curtain. He paused, the pen hovering in midair. Just trees, just wind. He shook his head and returned to the journal, flipping to a page marked Possible Factions Within the Agency. Outside, across the parking lot, a black sedan sat parked beneath a flickering street lamp. The engine was off. The driver didn't move. And in the back seat, a figure watched through a scope. Not close enough to make contact, just close enough to watch. A faint click echoed inside the car as a shutter snapped a photo of Tom at the table, pen in his hand, head down. The figure in the car spoke into a radio. Sheffield is stationary. Still writing. No sign that he's made contact with Rhodes yet. A reply crackled back through the static. Maintain distance. If he moves, follow him. Orders are to observe only, unless he finds the location. The black sedan remained still, patient, just waiting and watching. Wade Dillon sat in his Denver office, the city lights glowing faintly through the blinds behind him. It was well past midnight, but he hadn't even noticed the time. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up. 3 empty coffee cups sat on the corner of his desk like spent shell casings. He leaned closer to the screen, scrolling through obscure legal filings, declassified military documents, and dark web archives. The name Project Silva had brought up almost nothing in any public database, which made it even more intriguing. But Wade had a few tricks up his sleeve. Through an encrypted channel he rarely used, he put out a request to a contact from his old days, clerking with the federal courts. Someone with security clearance far above his own. And finally, something had come through. A file. Scrubbed of all official markings, buried between multiple layers of redirecting IP addresses. Wade's heart pounded as he opened it. Inside of it, a single scanned memo, dated 14 of August, 1993. It was addressed to the Office of Advanced Defense Research under the Department of Defense. And it was titled, RE, Subject Entities, Status Update, Project Silva. Subject entities had been observed migrating along predicted ecological corridors. Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, and portions of Northern California exhibit consistent EM anomalies correlating with sightings. Entity behavior suggests limited but intelligent avoidance of human populations. Recommended continued obfuscations of encounters through misinformation campaigns and environmental event explanations, i.e. wildfires, animal attacks, seismic disturbances. Agent containment protocol to remain in effect. Under no circumstances should contact be attempted without full containment protocols in place. Subject entities remain unpredictable and potentially extraterrestrial in origin. Wade leaned back, whistling low under his breath. Extraterrestrial? He cross-referenced the memo with historical power outages, disappearances, and even legal settlements made in remote counties near those regions. Several small towns in northeast Colorado had quietly accepted federal payouts tied to what were labeled infrastructure disruptions. But the descriptions in the original complaints included phrases like creatures with glowing eyes and humming in the trees. None of this was a coincidence. His phone buzzed. A text from Hank. You find anything? Wade typed back quickly. More than I wanted to. They're calling them subject entities. Look like the government thinks they're alien. and they're following the wildlife, moose and elk. He hesitated, and then he added, "Be careful, Hank. I have a feeling you are in this deeper than you know." He hit send, then saved the file in an encrypted drive just in case. He had a feeling this was only the beginning. The early morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long slats of gold across the rustic wood floor. Hank stood by the counter, a steaming mug of coffee in one hand, his other thumb swiping across his phone. Michelle sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and paper spread out like a miniature war room. She looked up at him just as the message came through. Hank read it once, and then again. His brow furrowed. The words subject entities sounded cold, clinical, inhuman. Hank set the phone down slowly, the weight of the message sinking into his bones like a late frost. He turned to Michelle, who had already read the expression on his face. "What is it?" she asked him while standing. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Wade found something. Government docs. Mentions the creatures. Calls them subject entities. Says they've been tracking them for decades. Thinks they might not even be from here." Michelle blinked. "Not from here, as in another state?" "No," and he met her gaze. "Another planet." A long silence passed between them. "Okay," she said finally, her voice calm but resolute. "This is starting to sound like a science fiction movie." Hank couldn't help but smile, despite the chill that had crept into the room. "Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking." It was a dark and moonless night as Tom Sheffield left the rental car hidden under a canvas tarp in the back lot of a defunct feed store, a small ghost town called Windy Hollow. The place was all boarded up windows and collapsing porches covered with graffiti, long forgotten by tourists and locals alike. He'd left the hotel silently, watching to see if the car lights followed him. He had not seen even a single vehicle since turning onto the dirt road leading toward Windy Hollow. He hoisted his canvas pack onto his back and stepped into the woods behind the old post office. The air was sharp and earthy, rich with the scent of pine needles and damp moss. No phone signal, no cameras, no satellites watching. At least, not any that weren't on private networks. Now, Darnell had mentioned a cabin once, years ago, when they still exchanged encrypted messages. A hunting shack left to him by a reclusive uncle, tucked deep away into the Catskills. It wasn't on any official land deed, no GPS coordinates. It was the kind of place you only found if you already knew that it existed. And Tom walked for 3 hours before the terrain began to slope upwards, his headlamp trained on the forest path before him. He paused at the base of a ridge, checking for signs, disturbed brush, snapped twigs, just like the ones he'd seen on his own property back in Colorado. And near the crest of the hill he spotted it, a single boot print in the muddy earth, recent, deep tread, hopefully belonging to Darnell. His pulse quickened as he pressed forward. As the first light of dawn crested the ridgeline, he reached a clearing ringed by birch trees, and at the far end stood the cabin, half sunk into the landscape, camouflaged by decades of decay and overgrowth. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Someone was inside. Tom crouched low, moving in slow arcs until he had a good vantage point through the brush. He counted the seconds between the shifting shadows in the window. Someone pacing. Pretty much alone from what he could tell. Maybe Darnell, maybe not. He tapped twice on the back door and then once more after a pause. If it was Darnell, he'd know the code. The door cracked open. Darnell stepped into view, gaunt, disheveled, with weeks of growth on his face, and a look in his eyes like he hadn't slept for days. Now the cabin interior was sparse. It had an old cot, a rusted stove, and piles of handwritten notes stacked across a table. Photos, maps, declassified schematics. "You're alive," Tom said. "Barely," Darnell replied. "It's good to see you, Tom. It's been years. I hope you know that they're tracking everyone who was ever involved in Project Silva. I barely got out. They wiped my apartment clean, but I got this out before they came." He nodded towards the table with the stacks of papers. Tom held up a small notebook he had found in Darnell's apartment. "I found this in the secret drawer in your desk." Darnell smiled. "I knew someone would find it. I'm glad it was you. Come on, sit down and I'll fill you in." Tom quietly bolted the cabin door behind him, then followed Darnell to the rickety table piled high with documents. The only light in the room came from a kerosene lamp, casting long shadows across the warped floorboards. "What the hell is going on, Darnell? I just met with Comey and he sent me to talk to you." A look of alarm passed over Darnell's face. "Comey sent you?" "He told me if anyone knew about Project Silva, it would be you," Tom replied. "Well, if Comey sent you, it was because he was hoping you would lead them to me. Did anyone follow you here?" "No, I made sure of it, and I parked my car down at Windy Hollow just in case and hiked up here. If anyone was following me, I would have seen him. What's this all about, anyway?" Darnell flipped through a file on his table with trembling hands. "You got to be careful who you trust, Tom, and Comey's one of them." "Who's them? And what's this all about, Darnell? I want to know what this Project Silva's all about." Darnell walked to the table with all the papers and maps and invited Tom to pull up a chair. Project Silva started as a Cold War initiative, biological surveillance units, but it evolved. Tom leaned in. The pages were dense with sketches and handwritten cipher notes and what looked like anatomical diagrams. One depicted a towering humanoid figure with elongated limbs and an exaggerated cranium. "All these sketches," Tom said, "they look like your average drawing of a Sasquatch." "Exactly," Darnell replied. "And according to these records, they were here long before us. Project Silva's mission was to locate, monitor, examine, and exploit or exterminate them." "Exploit or exterminate? Why and how? And what's so damn important about keeping all this a secret?" "Because the government has to be in the control," Darnell said. "Their interest in controlling these mysterious cryptids stems from a mix of fear and fascination and the cold logic of national security. You know as well as I do that the Sasquatch has long been rumored to possess uncanny physical abilities, incredible strength, stealth far beyond human capability, and an almost supernatural talent for avoiding detection. They see that as a potential threat. What if hostile nations could use these beings to their advantage? Weaponize them. If even half of the legends were true, then Sasquatch isn't just an anomaly, it's a biological asset. The U.S. government wants to control that asset before anyone else does. And not only that, these creatures demonstrate signs of intelligence such as pattern of migration, interspecies communication, the ability to use tools, and a presumed awareness of human presence. And this elevates them from animal to unknown entity. And anything that is unknown, especially something possibly more ancient and intelligent than our very own species, triggers every alarm bell in the defense world. Some within the agency even believe the Sasquatch are extraterrestrial, part of an ancient planetary seeding experiment or evolutionary anomaly. That theory made the situation even more dangerous. If these creatures were a bridge between species, or better yet between worlds, then their very existence could unravel centuries of scientific understanding and shake the foundations of social and religious belief systems. Imagine the public response if the government officially confirmed the existence of an intelligent, hidden species living in the remote corners of North America. Not only would that incite panic and excitement, there would have to be an Ecological Protection Act put in place, tourism monitoring, conspiracy theorists flooding remote areas, All of this would severely disrupt national stability in forest industries. Now, the solution? Control the narrative. Suppress the sightings, destroy the evidence, neutralize the threat. Genetic research teams operating under Project Silva's black budget were tasked with analyzing captured specimens. The creature's DNA, they hoped, might offer breakthroughs in regeneration, disease immunity, even enhanced cognition or strength. But this research required live samples. And in the process of capture and containment, it often proved fatal. The cost of scientific progress, in their minds, was silence. Tom sat in the small, upright wooden chair, taking in all that Darnell was telling him. Okay, I understand that the government wants to control the public's perception of any of these creatures, the Sasquatches, the Skinwalkers, and all the other cryptids, and keep them in the realm of fairy tales and legends told around a campfire. But what I don't understand is why are they going after civilians? People like me, who just happened to see one of these critters? Why are they following us? Yeah, there's a whole network of people just like you, Tom. People who think they've seen a Bigfoot tramping through the forest. The government wants to intimidate these people, wants to make them feel like they've imagined it all, or scare them enough to never speak of it again. And if that doesn't work, then they make them disappear. Accidents, suicides, lost hikers, you name it. Project Silva doesn't operate by the rules of due process. It's about containment, and it's about control. And once you're on the radar, they don't stop watching you. Tom exhaled slowly. And I'm on their radar now? You've been on it for a while, Darnell said. In fact, you've been on it since you first learned about Project Silva. And now, after visiting Comey and poking around where they really don't want you to, you're not just being watched, Tom. You're being hunted. Darnell leaned forward and whispered, "The only question now is, what are you going to do about it?" Tom leaned back, considering the question. What I want to do is expose them. I want to find out the truth and let the public know. Exactly what they're afraid of, Darnell replied. Tom sat staring at the papers on the table and a chill swept down his spine. Well, who's left from the original project, he asked. Hell, not many. Most either disappeared or went dark. There was one name that came up again and again in the files. Dr. Avery Langford. She was the lead cryptobiologist. She vanished over a decade ago, but I think that she's resurfaced under a different alias. Maybe working in a private lab in Nevada. Tom rubbed his temples, trying to connect the threads. There was a long silence before he replied. Okay then. We go to Nevada and we find Dr. Langford. We uncover the truth about Project Silva and we blow this wide open before more people vanish. Outside, a soft rumble like the buzz of a bee, low, grumbling, and getting closer. Not just one, but several ATVs, tearing through the woods like a pack of wolves hunting prey. Darnell grabbed a weathered duffel bag and quickly stuffed the files, the maps, and the papers into it. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they're on us, he yelled, yanking open the back door that led into the dense undergrowth behind the cabin. Tom slung his backpack over his shoulders and snatched a paper that had fallen to the floor. A grainy photograph of what looked like a dead Sasquatch being loaded onto a military flatbed. They sprinted into the woods, ducking beneath pine boughs, their feet pounding against the mossy ground, and behind them, the ATVs fanned out, their headlights cutting through the trees like sharp blades. Head for the creek, Darnell gasped. Follow the ravine. They crashed through the brush, branches slapping at their arms and their faces. Tom didn't dare look back, though he could feel the nearness of whoever was chasing them. Faceless men in black helmets, trained to hunt. A spotlight flared in the distance, sweeping across the trees. Tom didn't stop. He just ran faster, adrenaline surging like fire through his veins. A loud crack echoed behind him. Not a branch, a gunshot. They dove into the darkness of the trees, the edge of the ravine just yards away now. Behind them, the engines revved closer. Closer. At the edge of the ravine gave way beneath his feet. The last thing Tom saw was the ground rushing up to meet him. Well, to be continued next week. Folks, this guy's getting close to the truth. And that's how it works, you know. When you get close to the hive, the bees really begin to buzz. So come on around next week and, well, someone will tell you some more of this story. I'm got some work to do. I'll be gone for a couple weeks, but by golly, I can't wait to get back and hear the rest of this story. And until then, this is Clay Steele. You guys take care of yourselves. Good night. Hey folks, Clay Steele here. You know, I spend a lot of time outdoors around this here campfire. If you're like me, you get downright annoyed by all those pesky mosquitoes buzzing around. They're just looking for a free meal. Nothing ruins a good night under the stars faster than slapping and scratching at bites. And that's why I keep the bee itch stop. I keep it handy. One swipe and that itch is gone. No more burning, no more scratching, just good old relief. Made right here in Nevada with all natural ingredients. It's safe for the whole family. So if you're tired of being a mosquito buffet, do yourself a favor and get you some bee itch stop today. And this is Clay Steele. Watch out for them bugs.